is Madeline. I never in a million years thought I would be filming this video or any YouTube video, to be honest. But this week I had a friend kind of put it in a good perspective for me, and I realized that when I was first diagnosed with POTS 3 years ago, I got on YouTube and I looked for a video just like this one and couldn't find one anywhere. I was diagnosed almost 3 years ago in April of 2020, which, if you remember, is also the exact time that COVID was taking over the world. I was in college. I had been sent home from my school during March because COVID was beginning to happen, and we thought we were going home for 2 weeks, and then it ended up being forever. But prior to that, in February, right before COVID broke out, I woke up one morning and went to the bathroom. I lived in an apartment with 3 girls. I shared a room with my best friend, Callista, and I went to the bathroom, felt fine, came out of the bathroom, and everything went black. I was able to hit Callista because her bed was right there and kind of wake her up and say, hey, I'm passing out. And then I don't remember anything after that, obviously. I passed out. Callista got me on the floor. My roommates all called 911 and an ambulance came, and just the normal, went to the hospital. They took all the tests and checked my blood. They told me I was slightly dehydrated, but they had no answers as to why I just randomly passed out. So I didn't have an answer. I ended up going back to a doctor at that same hospital, and she ordered me a bunch of other tests. Everything came back normal, and she was not kind, and she told me I just needed to drink more water. Looking back, we now realize we were such good students, good rule following students in college, that everyone just thought I was hungover or had been drinking the night before, and that's why I passed out. That's why I was a little dehydrated. My best friend Callista, who I mentioned, she was defending me at the doctor's office, saying she only drinks water. She drinks water obsessively, because at that time I was, because I was feeling dehydrated all of the time. And yeah, I guess it kind of just ended up getting swept under the rug. And then flash forward to us being sent home from COVID. I hadn't felt as bad as I did when I initially passed out, but I did feel dehydrated all the time. I felt kind of out of it. I felt scared, just not like myself, but there was a lot happening at the time, so I wasn't really paying attention to my health. And then we got sent home, so I went to school in the northern part of South Carolina, and home is Charleston, South Carolina. So I was sent from Winthrop and went to go live at my parents', and we had no idea what was happening, what was gonna come. But pretty much as soon as I got home, I was feeling horrible, and all of these crazy symptoms started hitting me. I was dehydrated all the time. I was dizzy. I was disassociating. I didn't even know what that meant, but I was just completely out of it. The skin was peeling from my fingers, which is not something that's happened to me in years now. I had neuropathy in my fingers and in my feet, just constant new symptoms every day. I felt horrible. I was terrified of passing out again, terrified, and we had no idea what was happening. It was all of these crazy weird things just happening out of nowhere, no reason behind them, and any medical doctor able to answer my questions, they didn't know what was happening because all of my tests were coming back completely fine. Most of this 4 months is a blur for me. I was disassociated for all of the time. I was just so scared. I do know what led us to POTS was I felt really bad. I was going to pass out and like couldn't catch my breath. I couldn't breathe. So my mom called 911 and I ended up taking the ambulance to the hospital. My husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, he like drove an hour and a half to get there. My parents were there, but it was COVID, so no one was allowed inside. So I was just like sitting in this hospital room, terrified and freezing and having no idea like what just happened or what was happening to my body because I felt so bad. And the ER doctor at that hospital was a jerk. He wasn't nice. He like gave me no answers, which has been unfortunately my experience with most ER doctors. But there was one very sweet nurse who couldn't have been much older than me, and she was just like taking my vitals, and she mentioned POTS to me and told me what it could be, or that it could be POTS and what the symptoms kind of are and how they figure it out. And it kind of like not went in one ear out the other, but there were just so many different possibilities. People like doctors were wanting to test me for diabetes, like just everything that could be connected to a symptom. Doctors were trying to like connect them together. So I go home, nothing changes. And I'm obviously living with my parents at the time, and my mom is like the research guru when it comes to her kids, and she was like nonstop researching my symptoms, and she came across an article about POTS. I was in my bedroom and she was in hers, and she sent me the link, and I was like, oh, this is what that nurse said when I was in the ER. I totally forgot about it. And I read through, I was like, this really sounds like what I have. This makes sense. So I started to feel a little relieved that I had a name to it, as everyone kind of does when they get diagnosed. And we ended up getting connected with a cardiologist, which is usually the first thing that happens to POTS patients. It's changing a little bit now, but because your heart rate rises and you like can't control it, they usually send you to a cardiologist first. So I got sent to a cardiologist. It was COVID, so I couldn't go into the office, so all of the conversations were over Zoom, which was dumb, not helpful at all, because when you test POTS, you do a tilt table test, and we did it at my house. Like there was nothing we could do. They sent me a heart monitor, and they were like, yeah, it's probably POTS. So for that first, it's summer now, they put me on beta blockers, and at that time, my heart rate being really, really high and not being able to catch my breath and just overall feeling like really, really out of shape, like couldn't even walk up the stairs. Those were my worst symptoms. So the beta blockers helped at first with getting my heart rate under control. And for the rest of the summer, I was sick, but I got a new job and I could work, and everything kind of felt manageable. And come the fall, I decided to move to Charlotte, North Carolina, so about 4 hours north. My husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, was finishing his undergrad at a school in Charlotte. My school that I went to originally, that I had since decided to leave after getting sick, and I moved just to an online program. That school was about 30 minutes from Charlotte, so I was like, great, I'll be near my friends, I'll be near my boyfriend. I ended up moving into a house with 3 girls that were strangers, and I was fine for a long time. I would have symptoms every once in a while and be like, oh, I don't really feel good, I need to go lay down. But it wasn't until the following April, I think the following March leading into April, my like symptoms came back with a vengeance. My husband and I lost someone really close to us, and something about that time and what was going on just brought out all of my symptoms. I couldn't drive. I was a nanny at the time. I had to quit my job. I was feeling horrible and like completely at a loss, not able to find a doctor that could help me, and it was just horrible. It was horrible. So I decided to move back home. During this time, my husband had proposed while I was living in Charlotte, so we were engaged and planning our wedding. And when I decided to move home, it was the end of his semester, so he's from Charleston as well, decided to move back to Charleston, and we had lots of stuff, personal stuff to deal with there. And I was just feeling the worst, feeling the worst I've ever felt. I did not work for months, and I tried to start my own company, and I was too sick to do it, and was scared to do anything. I was scared to drive to interviews, was scared to even talk on Zoom because I was so afraid of passing out on Zoom. And my symptoms were just so, like, they were just taking over my life. My anxiety was so bad. My heart rate was high all the time. I could hardly fall asleep at night because I couldn't catch my breath. I felt like once I fell asleep, I wasn't going to be able to breathe anymore. I was dizzy all the time, and I just was completely disassociated. Like, I barely remember that time, hardly at all. And it was really scary. And that was when we were planning our wedding. And so I spent the whole summer kind of miserable in that. And in July, I decided I wanted to try to get on anxiety medication because my anxiety had just skyrocketed. I was just horribly anxious, and it was completely like I wasn't able to live a life anymore. So I just went to a regular MD, and I got prescribed anxiety medication, and after a couple of weeks it helped a ton. I noticed I was less scared of doing things, was able to manage my symptoms a little bit better, but from then on I was sick. And in September of that year, I moved into the house that my husband and I would eventually both live in, after we got married, and I lived there, and I was okay, but I wasn't great. I had gotten a job that I loved and was I was working again, remotely, so I was mostly just at home and would work from my desk if I could, but a lot of the times I was just working sitting on my couch or in my bed because I would feel dizzy. And then December came and we got married, which was great, of course, but I still wasn't feeling great. I was definitely not feeling confident in my ability to be alone because I was so scared of passing out. And I remember on our honeymoon, we went to Mexico and we stayed in this flawless resort. It was perfect. Like, we were having the best time, but even walking from the beach up to a room by myself, I remember being so scared, and also scared to tell my husband because I hadn't expressed my fear of being alone at that point. Like, my family and friends knew that I was scared of passing out, but being alone, even just for a second, was like, I would think about it all day leading up to the point where I was alone, even if it was just for 5 minutes. So at that time, it started to get pretty worse. We came home from our honeymoon and started our life in Charleston. And in February, I believe, we found out we were moving to Scottsdale, Arizona for my husband's job, which is where I live now. And we were super excited, but it wasn't going to be until June that we were going to move. So we had a little bit of time, and I kept working my job, and Ethan was getting his master's, and we were just living, but not. I was sick and just not doing our best. We just weren't. I definitely wasn't. I felt so sick, and I didn't want to talk to any other doctors. The anxiety medication was enough for me. I was done with doctors telling me that there's nothing wrong with me. I just wanted to manage it by myself. So that's what I did. Come June, we moved to Scottsdale and we're loving it, but I am immediately just overcome with symptoms and disassociated at all times. Like, my husband cannot leave me to go to the bathroom in a restaurant. Like, I am completely terrified of being alone, of passing out. At this point, my symptoms are mostly low blood pressure, feeling dehydrated, but it was also 115 degrees right when we moved here, and anxiety. So all of the symptoms that I had at the beginning of being diagnosed with POTS, like my heart rate being high and neuropathy and feeling dizzy and my fingers peeling, like that stuff had kind of faded into the background. And it was like, boom, your blood pressure is low and you are so anxious that you cannot do anything. So that started pretty much as soon as we got here, which was a bummer. We had made wonderful friends pretty much right away, and I would struggle to go out, struggle to even walk to someone else's apartment. Everything that I did, I would think about all day, every day. So I decided to kind of take a step back into getting help through doctors. At this point, I have almost a hatred for doctors because of my experiences thus far. And the only place I was willing to go was Mayo Clinic, because Mayo has done lots of studies on POTS, even though it's a newer syndrome. They've done just lots of good stuff in the POTS and autonomic community. So I was willing to go there, but getting an appointment there, I literally was rejected. And through an actual miracle, someone that we met had connections to someone on the board at Mayo, and he got me an appointment for a few months out. The appointment was in November, and I, of course, took it and was so grateful. I went through all of the tests that I didn't get to go through because of COVID. It was confirmed that I have POTS, which obviously we knew, but it was also confirmed that my POTS stems from my nervous system. So that was a big turning point for me. I went from looking at my disease as something that's just happening to me. We don't know why. We don't know how to fix it. We don't know how to control the symptoms. We don't know anything, just that it's called POTS. To, okay, this is stemming from my nervous system. So something that I'm sure you know, common with POTS, is it's caused by a traumatic event. And to this point, no one had been able to pinpoint anything traumatic enough to cause this. The only possibility that we thought it could be was when I was 18, I had spinal fusion surgery. So I was 18 when that happened, and POTS did not occur until over 2 years after that. So the neurologist at Mayo kind of was like, no, there's just no way. So we kind of forgot about that. And I went through all the tests and started getting really interested in the nervous system, and started researching and learning about ways to heal the nervous system, how the nervous system is damaged, and it all kind of came together for me. I have had anxiety my whole life. I was born and raised in an anxious setting, and I dealt with anxiety from the time I was born, I'm sure, and I didn't know. I, for all of my life, was underweight. When I went to college, I was 5'8" and probably 102 pounds. And I just thought that that was genetics. I had no idea that it was connected to anxiety, and that for my entire life, I wasn't able to keep on weight because I was so anxious, and I had kids make fun of me, and teachers asked me if I was eating, and people talked to my mom about it. And my whole life, well, first I hated that. And second, I just thought it was genetics. I just couldn't keep on any weight. So that was kind of my first realization, connecting anxiety to the whole equation, was that my weight was involved. And as I continued to dig and throughout my life, I realized that I had spent my entire childhood up until I was 22 in fight or flight at all times. I was always in survival mode. And I learned that can do quite a number on your nervous system, which makes perfect sense. And so my nervous system was damaged. It's been hurt over and over again. And the reason that my POTS symptoms came about was because I was in a place where I was comfortable. I was at school. I was doing things that I loved, and I was finally starting to let go of that survival mode and relax. And that's when the symptoms came on. So I was able to put that into the timeline that I just walked you through, and it added up for when all of my flare-ups were, and made perfect sense. So now I'm at this point where I have completely changed my mindset on how I go about healing. I used to believe this is something I was going to have forever. There's no end. And now I know that I will be healed from POTS, because I know I can heal my nervous system, and it's going to take time and therapy and medication and just lots of grace. But I believe I can do it, and I know that you can too. So basically, that is a very long-winded way of saying I started at just thinking this horrible thing was happening to me for no reason, to, oh, this is happening because I spent my entire life in survival mode, and now my body doesn't know what to do with the peace that it's found, and my nervous system is sending me into fight or flight even when I'm feeling completely safe. And that's causing my low blood pressure, that's causing my heart rate spikes, that's causing all of the weird things that POTS does to our body. So it was all rooted in anxiety the whole time. And I'm incredibly thankful that I've been able to learn that. That's not something that a doctor told me. It's not something that I read online. It was piecing together a bunch of different information from lots of different people, all that I've talked to all over the place. Just so much information. But that is my diagnosis story. That is where I am now. I would love to hear your story. If you want to leave it below in the comments, or just send me a message, I would love to hear it.